first. Those who truly understand it. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow, true peril is always the patriots who first hear the call. When loss of liberty is looming, as it is now, the siren sounds first in the hearts of freedom's vanguard. Come from their simple homes to find the fire and fight that symbolizes the full measure of human dignity and liberty. Revolution Radio, this is the sun is rising across this great United States, and that means straight from the heart of Texas. It is time for Clayton Douglas, the Free American. Take it away, Clayton.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I am Clay Douglas, and my guest today is Dr. Kevin Barrett. Kevin is an Arabist, an Islamologist. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correct, but he's also one of America's best-known critics on the war on terror. Kevin, welcome to the Free American Hour.
Well, thanks, Clay. It's an honor to be on your show.
Well, I've kind of been doing this for a long time. I started the show about 20 years ago. Bill Cooper and I were broadcasting and on worldwide shortwave. And so I got into this and started the militias around the country. And you may be aware, if you've read the ADL's publications like Armed and Dangerous and Southern Poverty Law's publications on false patriots. I think I achieved that when I was working with a man running for president by the name of Charles Collins. Did you ever get a chance to meet Charles Collins?
No, I haven't met him. I've met the ADL people, though they thought was on me too. So, yeah.
Now let me ask you a question here. I started the Free American magazine after what happened at Waco. I was so outraged by, well, where was the Texas Rangers? Where was the Sheriff's Department? Why did they let this happen? I seen the bullet holes from inside the home. It wasn't a compound. It was a ranch house, and 17 little children sitting in around the living room with 50 caliber bullet holes in the morning in the roof. And suddenly the ADL, I did that. I started the Free American magazine, I started this radio show, and I helped start the militias in New Mexico. And ADL listed me in their Armed and Dangerous, and I've been getting negative publicity ever since. Why did that happen? I had no idea who the ADL was at the time. I didn't know the whole Jewish con that's been going on for the last 100 years. I had no idea that then, but I certainly started picking up for it on that when the ADL started attacking me. They told you I started the militias, but they didn't tell you that I did it in the governor's office. And I've been under attack ever since, and what attracted my attention, one of the people that I interviewed on my show, you did a debate with, and I think, what was that, Al Jazeera TV?
Well, it would be Press TV.
Press TV. Oh, that's an Iranian thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Press TV is, along with Russia Today, it's one of the two good English language news sources. And it's ironic that today, to get free information uncensored by the Zionists here in the U.S., you have to listen to these stations from Iran or from Russia.
I've run stories on the Free American about Iran. The only thing they did was kick out our dictator, the Shah that we installed. They've never attacked us, and they've never done anything from us, and they've never part of why exactly are they our enemy du jour?
Well, it all has to do with Israel, of course. Iran is the only country in the Middle East that has the guts to stand up against Israel and tell the truth about what's really happening over there in Israel, or in occupied Palestine, as some of us call it. Every other country in the region is, to some greater or lesser degree, controlled by these international Zionists who control the big international banks and use the U.S. military to do their dirty work. But Iran managed to free itself in the revolution of 1979. They overthrew this U.S.-Israeli puppet dictator, the Shah. They closed down his torture chambers that were built for him by our CIA, and they created an independent country. And then, of course, they were rewarded for that when the U.S. Armed and funded Saddam Hussein and pushed him to invade Iran. And so there was a brutal, bloody war. The Iranians lost hundreds of thousands of people, maybe 1 million people in that war. But they prevailed. They would have actually kicked Saddam's butt and gone all the way to Baghdad, except for this massive Western support of Saddam, up to and including Rumsfeld flying over there and cutting a deal to give Saddam Hussein huge stocks of chemical weapons, which were then used not only against the Iranian soldiers, but against the Iranian civilians in their cities. So the U.S. basically slaughtered 1 million Iranians as a response to that revolution. But so that kind of cemented the Iranians' insistence on having an independent country. So they still have an independent country, and therefore they're free to express their views on Israel and Zionism. Everybody else in the Middle East agrees with them about Israel and Zionism, but no other government will say what the Iranians say. The Iranians come right out and say, you know, there's no such thing. There's no legitimate Israeli state. It's an occupation of Palestine, and it's a genocide, and it has to end. And that's what everybody thinks in the Middle East. I mean, I've got a PhD in Islamic studies. I've been dealing with that region for decades, and it's universally, basically, accepted by people in the Middle East that this is just another crusade. This time it's a Jewish Zionist crusade, and it's a genocide, and it has to end, and it will end. And someday these Israeli nuclear weapons, hundreds of nuclear weapons they have, targeting every capital in Europe, every capital in the Middle East, and probably every major city here in the U.S., are going to rot, and they're going to be like the Crusader castles, the ruins of the Crusader castles that you can find in the same region. So the Iranians are just coming out and running an independent country and telling the truth. And that's their crime, and that's why they've been named the enemy du jour. Sounds like your dog agrees with me.
Well, the AT&T guy is out there in the front yard carrying his letter around, trying to figure out how to get a telephone line into my house here. So we may get interrupted occasionally by the dog who think he's a burglar.
Well, you got to train your dog how to recognize, like, CIA, NSA, and Mossad guys, and only bark at them.
Well, you know, they'd probably be barking all the time. You know, it feels to me now. Maybe it's a little bit more personal with me because when I referred to 9/11 as an exaggerated case of Jewish lightning on the air, and pointed out that no Arabs in the cave in Afghanistan made the U.S. Air Force stand down. That was in March of 2004. I put a picture of building number 7 on my cover, and some strange things happened. I had Larry Silverstein's quote on there that went out nationally. And then George Bush allowed the NSA to tap everybody's phones. But turns out it wasn't NSA didn't tap anybody's phones. Probably still aren't. They subcontracted it out to an Israeli firm, Amdocs and Converse. And so suddenly all of our cell phones, including my AT&T phone that I had since the beginning, suddenly that was my conversations were public property. I called home and asked my son, where do you want me to go next, son? Where are you, Dad? I'm on the north side of Phoenix. Go down 24th Street to McDowell, turn left, go to the wheel shop right there. 2 blocks before I got to McDowell, I got hit. I got rushed to the hospital. And Kevin, they kept me drugged as they tried to do to Brandon Robb. They kept me drugged for 3 months for 3 broken ribs. And I started getting visits from
Wow.
people with 3-piece suits. Hi Clay, how you doing? You been hallucinating, Clay? You can thank us for that. And that story is
Hmm.
all included in my book. But the point is, the doctors in the hospitals were part of a plan to basically silence me. And they wanted to do long-term care. The only way that could have come from an Israeli company, and the ADL is the one that's been attacking me. Why are they so afraid of truth tellers? Why are they, you know, is this? Basically, the whole New World Order is the exact blueprint laid out by the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And if you talk about matter of fact, your buddy Lee there, and I've got all that up on the. We can play clips if you want. I've got all that up on your conversation with him. He's pretty typical. I linked all those conversations, especially with him and with me, because it's typical. Protocols. Those are forgery. Don't you know that? Let's see. Somebody had to write it. I don't think it matters too much who wrote it, but if it's a plan for one world government under Satan, and the question is who is using that on us today. Is that happening? And here's a question that maybe you can answer for me. I can't. I've said there's a few things I can't tell my audience. I can't tell you if the government took over the mafia or if the mafia took over the government. I can't tell you if the U.S. runs Israel or if Israel runs the U.S. Israel has 400 nuclear weapons. They brag that they can hit the capital of every country in Europe. They've got nuclear submarines, atomic missiles, and they're trying to point the finger at Iran for having atomic weapons. So it looks like we've got another. The first atomic attack, I'm pretty well convinced, it was 9/11. They blew up the World Trade Centers with probably controlled nukes, and we've been at war ever since. But people have never done anything to us. Is this a Jewish plot? Is this
Yeah, that's
United
right.
States? Is this the United States going in? But Israel started out as a Rothschild colony back in the 1900s, didn't it?
Yes, that's right. Israel was really created by the Rothschild dynasty. They were the main funders. The Rothschilds are the biggest international bankers. There's a whole bunch of these families of wealthy international bankers. It does so happen that the majority of them are ethnically Jewish, but they're not religiously Jewish anymore. They're basically atheists and/or Satanists. I mean, some of them sort of trace that through Shabbatai Zevi, this kind of false messiah guy, and the followers of Shabbatai Zevi are given to like religious sexual orgies and weird satanic stuff like that. It seems like the Rothschild people apparently dabble in that sort of thing. But yeah, they're basically atheist Satanists. They're at war with established religion, especially Christianity. It doesn't really have much to do with Judaism as a religion, as far as I can tell. It seems like it's more of a power play. And they realize that using this financial system that they control, that they get the right to create the money by lending it into existence at interest, backed by nothing, But basically, if they can print the money, they control the world. There are even quotes from Rothschild who said that. So they ended up with most of the West money under their control by the late 19th century. And at that point, the Zionist movement was getting started. People like Theodor Herzl were banging the drums to get the Jews to go start their own country in Palestine. And so, that would never have happened if the Rothschilds hadn't funded it. And the big move was World War I. Now, maybe they created World War I. That's what some people say. I haven't seen the proof of that, but it looks pretty suspicious. But in any case, in 1917, the British were about to declare peace with the Germans, and both sides were going to go back to their original armistice lines. And then, of course, the Rothschilds stepped in and told the British, we can win this war for you if you give us Palestine. So the British put out the Balfour Declaration for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, and the Rothschilds used their assets to ruin the Germans. They brought the U.S. into the war and caused, 100,000 Americans to die for Israel, for Zionism, and won the war for the Brits, and then crushed the Germans, and they extracted all the wealth from the Germans in the 1920s. Well, this would kind of explain why Hitler and his people were so angry at Jews. Now, of course, this wasn't the Jews that did it, it was the Rothschilds, but they did have a lot of control over these kind of Jewish national tribal mechanisms thanks to their money. So, yeah, this so-called New World Order thing is a bunch of kind of radical Freemasonic types who are funded by the world's biggest international bankers, and their objective is to create a one-world government. So that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah, I have told people, in talking about this, we get people now, they're not the Lee Kaplans out there. Lee Kaplan is a paid agent for the Mossad. He works through the Mossad civilian arms, which would be the ADL and Southern Poverty Law, I believe. And of course, they've got the lobbying organization, AIPAC. So, but if you mention this, I mean, you're a hater, you're a racist, you're anti-Semite. This is all programmed responses we can basically thank television for, can't we? Or is it a program response?
Yeah.
I mean, are they falling for, what are they falling for? Are they falling for the Zionist line, or are they falling for the Schofield Bible trying to convince Christians that Jews are somehow their superior? I mean,
that's the Zionists have so much money now. Like I said, the Rothschild people and their friends print the money for the wealthiest parts of the planet. They don't quite control the whole planet yet, but they've run the U.S. Banking system since 1913 and the European banking system since before that. So they've got plenty of cash. And with that cash, they can fund a whole lot of propaganda, buy up a whole lot of media. People that now own the media, of course, we hear this from everybody, including from a lot of people who wouldn't like the stuff that we're saying right now, these kind of liberal and leftist and socialist types, who admit that, the media's gotten bought up by just, 7 corporations control 90% of the media now. But then the question is, who's running those 7 corporations? And you check it out, it turns out that they're pretty much all ethnically Jewish, maybe not religious, and they're all committed Zionists. And there's some people have spoken out about this. Philip Weiss, who used to write for the New York Times, wrote a great piece called "Do We Jews Control the Media? And So What If We Do?" And he admitted, I guess the word was dominate, not control, as I recall. And so anyway, he said, sure, of course. He said, I've been working in the big media for my whole life, and more than half of my bosses and important decision-making colleagues have been Jewish. And then he says, well, so what? He says, that's really important because all of these people have been conditioned to believe that they are the last line of defense for Israel. So they are out there putting out pro-Israel propaganda as effectively as they possibly can through this media that they dominate. And that's convinced the American people to black is white, truth is lies, ignorance is strength. So it's a historical phenomenon. It's not like there's some kind of ages-old sort of evil conspiracy or anything like that. Everybody's fighting for their own interests. It's just that this particular group, which managed to control the banking system for the wealthiest part of the world a couple of centuries ago, has gotten the upper hand. But today, what's really offensive to me is the way they maintain their power by lying all the time. I'm just tired of their lies.
Mossad, their motto is warfare by deception. I mean, how much more out front could you be?
Well, that's true. In a way, like my friend Gilad Atzmon says, and he's a Israeli-born, ethnically Jewish guy who's now a British citizen and one of the world's leading jazz musicians and writers.
Wonderful guy. Had him on my show. Yes, sir. He is a nice, good man. Good man.
Fantastic guy. Yeah, Gilad's a lot of fun. So he says it's not a conspiracy. It says it's all out in the open. They admit what they're doing, and to some extent that's true. That they're not hiding it very well, not making a real big effort to hide a lot of it. But then when you try and call them out, that's when they start lying. So it's weird. On the one hand, a lot of it is kind of right out in the open, but on the other hand, there are these kind of extreme big lies that are called out to stop anybody from doing anything about it.
It's the amazing thing to me is that our founding fathers were totally aware of this. Thomas Jefferson told us that if you ever allow a private bank to issue your money, the banks and the corporations that spring up around them will leave your children homeless in the land that we conquered. Isn't that what just happened?
Yeah, it looks like that. Yeah, it looks like it came true. So it's sort of like the protocols where, Jefferson, of course, was somebody that we would admire probably more than whoever wrote or forged the protocols or whatever. But the fact is that there are these kinds of really eerie premonitions that we get from Jefferson, from Rothschild a century ago, saying whoever controls the money controls the country. Doesn't matter who gets elected to office. And then, as you mentioned, the protocols earlier. They are kind of eerie in the way that they seem to describe accurately what has happened since then. So whether or not they're an authentic, secret document issued by the secret society or whether they're a forgery, either way, they seem to describe what's going on. In fact, the PNAC, Project for a New American Century, which of course disbanded and tried to hide because it got exposed. If you look at those guys, what they've been doing, I mean, they're worse. They make the guys who, the protocols of the Elders of Zion, they look like a pretty modest sort of, little old ladies' tea party. These PNAC guys who said we need a new Pearl Harbor to go to war against the Middle East, double the military budget, shred the Constitution, all this fun stuff. They drafted that document calling for a 9/11 style false flag attack. Exactly 1 year before 9/11. I mean, that, to my mind, PNAC is a lot nastier than the Elders of Zion, and they did it all right out in the open.
Yeah, didn't Rabbi Dov Zakheim, the guy that used $2.6 trillion that the Pentagon couldn't account for to fund 9/11, I mean, wasn't he in that PNAC document too? He was.
I believe he was a signer of PNAC, yeah. He also had an interest in those companies that were developing remote hijacking technology,
yes,
which was pretty interesting. And a bunch of people from those companies were listed as passengers on the 4 planes of 9/11. And that's another pretty interesting subject, is what was really going on with these 4 alleged flights on 9/11. They were all about a quarter full, which is ridiculous. Cross-country flights almost never fly with 1/4 full. Here we get all 4 of those flights were about 1/4 full. And if you look at who was supposedly on these flights, number one, there were no Arab names on the passenger lists. And number two, there were a whole lot of these military contractor, secret military project type people, including people from these companies controlled by Dov Zakheim, who, as you said, embezzled $2.3 trillion while he was comptroller of the Pentagon. Apparently that money was used to fund 9/11, as you said. And so a bunch of people working for him on remote hijacking technology were on those planes. And then the pilot of the plane that supposedly hit the Pentagon, only there's no evidence that any plane did,
right.
Any big plane anyway, that guy actually had been the designated pilot in a crash a plane into a Pentagon drill from 1 year before. So, they're not being very subtle about the way they do these things, but I guess they don't need to be if they control the media.
That's right. And again, that's why I started the whole Free American Magazine and radio show. Now, how do we? We've had people on over the last week. I've had people on that talked about the programming. Now we know now it's mainstream news that the NSA is tapping everybody's phones, but we knew that 10 years ago because they used it to tap my phones. Three different times, meetings that I was going to see, one about funding and all that, never happened. One guy calls up and says, "Clay, I want to help you get Free America started again." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that, but it's expensive." He said, "Clay, I got $1.5 million in one account. Money's not an issue. Come down and talk to me." Well, buy me breakfast, Casey. I'll be down in the morning. I got down there in the morning to Douglas, Arizona, and I couldn't see Casey because he was surrounded by Border Patrol. He had been shot the night before coming out of Safeway with my breakfast. And,
Oh boy.
so this this is warfare. This is what we do. People like you and I and Gordon Duff are putting out information. And I got to tell you, Gordon, sometimes I get a little hopeful talking to Gordon. What my question is, if you and I can prove all this, if you and I know all this as reporters, as intelligent people, and anytime a communist regime takes over a country, they go after people, three classes of people in order. They go after the farmers first because they don't want you being able to feed yourself. Two, they go after the intelligentsia, that's anybody that's smart enough to know what the hell they're doing. And third, they go after the veterans and the law enforcement that might remain loyal to the old regime. Gordon Duff sees that coming. I see that coming. I said that seems to me what's been happening now. People like Brandon Robb and the young man that blew the whistle on us murdering civilians and reporters, Bradley Manning. And we're having reporters killed that are doing some of these stories, like Michael Hastings from Rolling Stone. Remote controlled. That's like a drone assault practically, and or using the technology of Dov Zakheim to remotely control a Mercedes Benz and drive it into a tree. Is the war heating up? I mean, what we've been talking about, we've been doing this for well over 20 years. I kind of was educated by Eustace Mullins, and he was educated by Ezra Pound. So we've been really fighting this war for 100 years at least. Is it heating up now?
Yeah, it's been going on. I think it is, yeah. I think they put it into fast forward with 9/11. That was meant to change the game. Before that, this kind of illusion of freedom and democracy and, USA still being what it used to be was being maintained. And there's a quote by Frank Zappa that you could look up. I don't have the exact quote. Something like it says, whenever it's no longer, worth their while to maintain this illusion of freedom and democracy, they're going to just, pull down all the curtains and, we'll see the mechanism behind the curtain at that point. And that's kind of what I think what they started doing with this big 9/11 thing that really, really was a game changer, and it was designed to be a game changer. And so things have been moving a lot faster since then. I think that they're in a situation right now where they have to push it pretty hard if they're going to maintain and expand this power base, because, well, the rest of the world is less controlled by these people than the European world. They own the banks that run the U.S. and Europe, which has historically dominated the world's economy. Even today, I think about 50% of world GNP is the European countries, including Europe, the U.S., and Canada and Australia, the so-called West. So right now the West has 50% of world GNP, and it's declining. And the projections are, if the trends continue, that by 2050 the West will only have 15% of global GNP. Now, what they're kind of doing here is trying to transition their control of the Western financial system into complete global control. And to do that, they partly have to intensify their political control of the West. So they stage 9/11. They turn, they impoverish the American middle class. Turn U.S. into a banana republic where they can use the military and the spy apparatus to go around the world and increase their control there. They want to make sure that as these other countries grow and get stronger, that they're going to dominate those countries too. And it's right now, China is still to some extent independent, even though these New World Order banksters are doing their best to get influence there. Japan still is pushing back a little bit. They won't nationalize their postal bank, which is the world's biggest target for the New World Order. These Rothschild banksters have been trying to grab the Japanese postal bank forever, and the Japanese won't sell it to them. And right before Fukushima, in December, before Fukushima happened in the spring, this high-level Japanese politician said that he had been threatened with an earthquake weapon if they didn't sell their postal bank to the Western banksters. And boom, suddenly Fukushima happens. Looks a little suspicious. In any case, the bottom line here is that Russia, China, Japan, India, not so. India is getting largely under Israeli control at this point, but there are a lot of parts of the world, and of course Iran and Syria are examples that are not under their control, that are still acting independently to some extent.
We're talking about the BRIC countries, what they call the BRIC countries, right? Brazil, Iran,
the BRIC countries are
Russia,
yep,
and China. It's
interesting,
isn't it,
they're growing share of the world economy. They realize, why should they? Why should all?
Oops. Still with me? I lost you.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you there for a second. But these BRIC.
Go ahead. Got you.
Yeah, the BRIC countries realize that they're paying a huge tax to the Western international bankers. So why should they do that? Why should they let the Western banksters create the currency and force them to give good, valuable goods and services for that currency? So they're working on alternative currency arrangements and fighting back against this, Rothschild-dominated Western bankster cabal. And so the banksters, in order to try and beat that, are turning the West into this militarized fascist or communist, whatever you want to call it, authoritarian dictatorship that's pouring everything into military and spy technologies in an attempt to take over the world using these military and spy technologies. So they're trying to use and to do it, they're destroying our traditions of liberty and democracy, and they're destroying our middle class.
It's how do we fight against this? Now, I've asked myself, I've been reporting on this for 25 years. I kind of got my teeth into this when I got a hold of a copy of the story of George Bush's Operation Watchtower. That's where the CIA and Mossad, with Bush covering from him while he was CIA director, started bringing all the heroin and the cocaine into this country. That's still going on. We're still being drugged. But today you can bribe a doctor and you can, you can get a substitute here. You don't have to do the heroin or the cocaine. You can get Valium and other 2,000% markup drugs. What are they doing? I mean, aren't they doing the same thing to us that they did to China and the Boxer Revolution? They said they pumped the opium into China, sold it to the Chinese, and ended up installing communism. And that looks like the direction they're going here. Americans are so brain dead or drugged out or pacified by fluoride, or maybe it's the cell towers, maybe it's the chemtrails, maybe it's the smart meters outside your house. We are being dumbed down and can't recognize when we're being enslaved. They've improved the art of slavery to the point the slave don't know they're slaves. How do we oppose this if the people aren't smart enough to get out of the damn rain?
I couldn't say it better than that. You asked the question. I don't know. I mean, The biggest drug, of course, is television. I mean, that's the drug that they've used in the way that the Brits used heroin or opium against the Chinese. I mean, television has been the biggest drug that they've used. And the good side is, the silver lining in all of this is that the alternative media is starting to make some serious encroachments on the instead of sitting there and watching CNN and NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox News, all that crap, more and more people are starting to go on the internet and get their news from Veterans Today, Press TV, Russia Today, what really happened, all these alternative sites that are, all of them have their own peculiarities. None of them is 100% perfect. I mean, I personally like Veterans Today and I like Press TV. I work with both those organizations. But there are a whole lot of these organizations that are telling at least a pretty significant chunk of the truth about all these important issues. And so the alternative media, the real alternative media, not the foundation-funded pseudo-alternative left-leaning commie media that they pretend is alternative but isn't, the Nation and the Progressive and all that garbage. But the real alternative media is starting to really build up more and more power, and people are finding out about it through the social media. So there's an awakening and there's a move away from the mainstream. All the mainstream newspapers are starting to lose money and decline. Their readership is declining. The mainstream TV is losing market share. And recently we've seen that the powers that be feel the need to try to take down Press TV from the satellites, because Press TV is doing a better and better job of packaging this kind of alternative information that you and I put out in a high production values format. They're really the cutting edge, I think, right now. Even though Press TV, they're overcoming a certain kind of clunkiness that comes out of them, being run out of Iran. That clunkiness is slowly disappearing, and they're getting, slicker and slicker, and they are absolutely telling the truth and open to all viewpoints about what's going on in the West. So there's a rise of the alternative media, and I'm kind of putting my chips on that, carrying on what you did, you've been doing for so long. You're a true pioneer in this field, and so the rest of us now who are taking advantage of the internet and running with it, and putting out as much of this true information as we can while we can do it, and it puts the powers that be in a tough position. If they shut down the internet, they shut down the economy, and they also shut down a lot of their capability to try and spy on us. They can, I'm sure, the NSA has all this stuff saved, all of our key help them. And if they take down the internet, then that's gone, and we're in an emergency situation, and at that point, the economy tanks, and maybe people are going to go out in the streets. It's going to be unstable. I don't think they really want that. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. If they let the internet continue the way it's been going, the alternative media is going to get the truth out in a bigger way. And if they try and shut it down, then they're going to precipitate a very unstable situation. So I think we need to keep pushing the alternative information and keep trying to organize people, especially locally. Talk to your friends and neighbors. Have some local meetings. Do that kind of militia type stuff that you were doing.
Well, I have improved. I have improved on that, Kevin. I have improved on that. What I've come up with now, based on the interviews I've had over this last month. Many years ago, I started a thing called Liberty Villages, and basically all that was a way to make money on a little 5-acre piece of property, how to develop it in a way that it would be a retirement home for me. That was my plan. That's how Liberty Villages started, and I based that on if we can generate our own electricity. If we've got a generator with a Geek carburetor, if we got solar over here and a windmill here, the windmills work pretty good for us all across this country, setting in this country. And we could put solar on our roofs, and we could grow our food in our backyards. We could turn our whole neighborhood into a Liberty Village. What can you make in your garage? Can you make solar panels? Can you make transistors? Can you build windmills? What can you make out of that? What can you make out of this? And what can you grow in your backyard? So I kind of expanded the idea of Liberty Villages so that you could put a flyer out in your neighborhood and say you want to become a little bit more self-sufficient, you want to become a little bit more protected. How about working together? Because if we work together, and this is really, I think, the secret of the Jews. I made a statement. People ask me, "Why do you hate the Jews?" Well, I don't hate the Jews. I kind of admire them. If us white boys had that together, we'd own the Federal Reserve, we'd own the Bank of England, we'd own the World Bank, we'd own the International Monetary Fund. But unfortunately, most of us being Christians, just like that 60 million Christians the Bolsheviks killed after Stalin took over, using Stalin. We have a problem with usury. We don't like making money off of our fellow Christians. And I think Muslims have got that too. I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, this is what this whole New World Order thing is: control of the bankers, by the bankers, and for the bankers, of every asset and every, including the water you drink, the water that falls off your roof in 2 states. You can't even drink that now. What's
yeah, it's kind of humorous in a way. It's going so far. Yeah, next thing they'll be privatizing the air, and the bankers are going to air, and every breath you take, you're going to have to repay interest, and I guess that would mean that your lungs are going to be empty pretty soon.
They're actually doing that. Part of the technology was just on with Deborah Tavares yesterday. She talked about them deionizing the air that we're breathing, so it's not quite as healthy for us, not quite as good for us, not quite as good as going down to the ocean walking in the sand. I mean, this is all part of the control.
Brzezinski said.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Brzezinski said it's harder to control people today than it is harder to control 1 million people than to kill 1 million people, and so they're working on all these fantastic schemes to try to continue their control system, but it's slowly breaking down as accurate information, uncensored information gets out. So I like your idea of these liberty villages, or the local self-sufficient groups doing as much as they can for themselves. That's a really good idea.
There's
I hope more and more people are doing that.
Also, and I've been reporting, I've said we probably had the technology to make this a garden planet, at least a garden continent, for 100 years, and they've kept it from us. They've suppressed it. Tesla's technology, magnetics, running your automobiles on water or alcohol or hemp, for that matter. All that's been taken away. Our number one cash crop, hemp, taken away. They're trying to break us. So and every neighborhood we're sitting in, I'm sitting in this neighborhood right now, and I'm looking out all around. Okay. I'm sitting in this neighborhood, and I'm like, where did this come from? Damn it! Come back here. Hey, guys. You've been here all the time. Get over there. Come on. Get back here. All right. The thing is that this neighborhood came from farmland. It came from ranches. All of these little petty laws, all these zoning, all those all those regulations here. You can't grow tomatoes in your backyard. Not only can you not grow hemp in your backyard, you can't grow marijuana in your backyard. Now you can't grow tomatoes in your backyard without asking for permission. I think we could turn, if we could get people to work together, it would be a mass movement, and we could turn every house into an energy-producing structure, and every backyard into producing food. They keep telling us we're going to have shortages. There's going to be a problem. There's droughts here and there's droughts there. Well, if we're doing it all across the country, we kind of solved the drought problem. If we're working together and we're using the internet, I've got schools on here. You can go to Timothy Bible College. You can get your master's degree. You can go to Little River School and get your high school diploma and your grade school education. We've got the answers here. We know about GMOs. We know that Monsanto is poisonous. We know that Monsanto gave us not only Roundup, but Agent Orange. and now they want to feed your kids rats with food with the poison already in it. We got to know the enemy here, and that brings one more question to mind. If we know all this, we can prove all this, and certainly all the evidence is there, why can't we get, it doesn't necessarily take a million man march on Washington, all it takes is 12 honest men, doesn't it? If we had honest law enforcement, if we had honest military.
Yeah, that's pretty important. That's what the Oath Keepers is one of the most important groups out there, trying to reach out to law enforcement and military. That's right. And Veterans Today is one of the great things about that organization is that they're reaching out, they're targeting, focusing on getting this information out to the patriotic people in the military. Like Marx wasn't entirely wrong saying power grows out of the barrel of a gun. So anything we do at the local level, at the level of alternative information, it's all having an effect. And sometimes we get discouraged. Well, we've been doing this for a long time, and the change is slow and incremental. But the way change works is it's slow and incremental for a whole, who knows how long, and then something catalyzes it, and boom, big things start to happen. You saw the Occupy movement looking like it might trigger something big. And I think if the economy keeps going the way it looks like it's going, there's probably going to be something even bigger than Occupy, and by then, maybe enough of the police and the military will have figured things out to be joining the protesters rather than breaking their heads.
Well, I believe we are making progress in there. We have 300 sheriffs, because right after I had him on my show, Sheriff Richard Mack got the Constitutional Sheriffs and Police Association put together. They've got almost 300 members, and this whole plan that I talked about, the Liberty Villages, putting solar on the roof, putting a garden in the backyard, living the way your grandmother did, learning to relearning new skills, and there's one other aspect here, and I think since I remember doing an interview with such a gentleman, I just had him on last week. He created Ithaca Hours. Now you got a whole town in New York that keeps their money, keeps their economy in the county by trading in Ithaca Hours. Here's 20 hours. You give them that instead of a $20 bill. There's alternative currency now springing up in mile-high money or mile-high hours, and up in a little community in California, they've started doing that. So how better to oppose the Federal Reserve than not use their money? It's a note anyway, so you borrow that to use it. If we create our economy based on our labor, based on our production, based on what we can grow, based on what we can create, based on what we can build, based on what we can do on these computers, in the privacy and safety of our own home, we can educate our children, and we can retake what Richard Tully Hoskins referred to as the basis of every civilization, the self-sufficient family farm. And we really need our veterans right now, because the real family farms out there, the ones the ones you can't move to because you got a job in your neighborhood, these farms are going to be under attack. They're under attack on the border by the illegals. They want to use them as bases. They're under attack by the bankers. Obama even put out an executive order that said that the rural community is where the strength of America is, so the government's got to get involved. I agree with everything except that part, the government getting involved. But if we organize as a county, we're using the structures our ancestors gave us and created, and it wasn't too bad back then I think it could be good in the future with people like Richard Mack, with people like the Oath Keepers. Only problem I got with the Oath Keepers is since Stuart's Jewish, he doesn't want to talk about the Israeli issue and doesn't want to come on my show. But
yeah, I've had him on my show, even though I'm an anti-Zionist Muslim. So I guess he's not as bad as some of them. I like Stuart, and I think it's hard for people, American Jewish people have been brought up with the same conditioning as the rest of us, only more so. So it's even harder for them to break through it. But
that's right. And the elite hide behind them. Stay with me. We've got one more hour to do. And this is some good stuff. Let's keep it going here. You guys tune in. Tell your friends. Right back.
FreedomSlips.com. We'll be right back.
What the year will remain a dictatorship. Oh, be quiet. Why are you guys so anti-dictators? Imagine America with a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people